1958 saw the publication of Chinua Achebe's Things Fall Apart, a novel important on counts more than one. First and foremost, it is the first significant novel to have come out from Africa in English, which is not the same thing as saying that this is the first African novel or first African novel in English. There have been precursors, but then they're lost in time. None except a specialist keeps record about one or two similar things that have been published earlier. But this is the prototypical African novel, and not only prototypical or rather representative African novel, this is also, I would argue, the most representative novel of post colonial literature, possibly the most representative piece of post colonial literature. Just as Edward Said's Orientalism is the most representative text of post-colonial theory, Chinua Achebe's Things Fall Apart is the most representative text of post-colonial literature. It shows in great details that how an indigenous society of Africa, the Igbo society, disintegrated in the face of the onslaught of colonialism by two means: missionary activities and then trade and commerce, and finally direct government. This is the, in a way, trinity or three prongs of colonial attack. Generally, traders and missionaries come first, these two angles, and then this lead to the establishment of a government. This happened in India also, in all other places. Now, the novel focuses on a particular character whose name is Okonko. Okay, he is the hero of his village, and one thing that we get to know is that the heroism in Africa, in a sense, is more or less like modern heroism, because Okonko does not belong to a royal family as such. In fact, they do not have that kind of concept of a blue blood. It is said in the novel itself that if a child washes his face or the mouth, he can sit in the on the lap of the greatest and the highest. That is, or that this is a society where one's performance was not judged by his father's achievements, like that. So individuality mattered, unlike the system of caste in India or class in Europe. Caste and class both, because in Europe also, in France, England, blue blood concept is there, but Igbo society was not like that. So Akonko's father Unoka was a very weak person, weak, in the eyes of, say, masculinity, but that is also the eyes that Igbo society has. He was given to, kind of playing flute, and then not very particular about earning, and a weak kind of a person. So possibly it is against his weakness that Okonko from childhood brings himself as a very strong character, and is a great wrestler. There was none to compete with him in all the neighboring villages, etc., etc. Though his eldest son again is somewhat like his father, which is what he resents, because he is always afraid that he should not be, or his son should not be like his father, who was a non-entity. In fact, kind of woman. His father was termed as within the African, or say Igbo society's term. Similar patterns exist in India. So it is a society based on masculine or masculinist principles, or patriarchal principles, would rather say. There is practice of polygamy. Okonko had many wives. The greater hero you are, the more wives you could afford and have. Those things are there, but that is not the perspective of the novel or the novelist. These are their internal cultural traditions, and possibly the novelist seems to argue, if you read this in conjunction with the novelist's teacher, that his main idea was to portray how Nigeria or Africa was a very civilized country or nation long before the missionaries, made them so-called civilized. In fact, they destroyed their culture. Now, the crux of the matter is this. Since I do not give stories, these are critical materials mostly, but still, crux of the matter is this: this person Okonko accidentally kills a clansman, and then they have those ritualistic customs of punishment. You have to atone for it if you kill your own man. So he he lives in his mother's village in banishment or in exile for a very long time. Exile. Edward Said made it famous. This is a common trope of, we can say, all great literature. But by the time he comes back, the damage has been done. He can see that his village, sorry, that his community has been gradually won over by the missionaries on the one hand, and then their trade practices also, whatever they had internally, is largely intruded into by the European traders. He resists heart and nail. Heart and soul, tooth and nail. He resists. But then finally it's a failure. So that is how things fall apart. And the parallel in the novel is between Okonko's individual fall and the fall of his Igbo community. Great leaders that way, in India, Southal leaders or even non-tribal leaders. So the Queen of Jhansi, you can say, the Queen of Jhansi, the fall of Jhansi. So Queen of Jhansi, Lakshmi Bai, is in a way very similar to Okonko. Say she tries to protect her clan, protect her people, but then fails and cannot finally that the onslaught of the huge colonial enterprise. So that is it. The Igbo society also has a similar fate, and it is not only Igbo society, all African groups and societies had similar fate. And unlike India, or say Indian subcontinent, colonization in Africa had more fatal results for many counts. One is that, for example, that it was an oral tradition completely. So it is easier to wipe out things which are oral. In India, we have had written literature, written texts, written discourses for centuries before the British came. So it was not very easy here. But in Africa, the wiping out has been almost total. So some now the problem is, if you do not read the other essay, the essay that I have referred to, the novelist's teacher, where Achebe makes his stance very clear that his idea is to defend Igbo culture by all means. If you do not read that, and if you read the novel on its own, then you might be led to believe that Achebe's stance is ambiguous. That is, he does not portray Igbo society as a perfect society, because there is polygamy, even wives are beaten by Okonko, and most importantly, he murders a kind of a person who was supposed to be with him, Ikemefona, though his murder was ordained by their oracle, but Okonko was not supposed to murder him because he was like his father, because Ikemefona was with him for a long time. So human sacrifice, all these are there. So you may be led to believe that his Achebe's stance was dubious. It is possible, because it is nowhere written that you have to read the text along with the other essay. But when we do studies, formal studies, we always read a little more than the text, and there are critical materials, there are contexts. So that is why the novelist as teacher, if you read it thoroughly, you will understand that this is far from Achebe's intention. Though we have intentional fallacy and postmodernism, death of the author and all that, but this is post-colonialism. Achebe's single most important intention is to show that their culture and tradition was not a long night from which the missionaries absorbed them. So it is a kind of as it is representation and a lament for the loss of a great culture, of great tradition, that is of Igbo people and Igbo society, and by implication African society at large and all post colonial societies.